Hey, welcome to those who've joined so far this evening. You've joined Kinark Child and Family Services Family Education Series. This evening's presentation is going to be on the social and emotional development in the early years. Typically what we do is we give folks a few minutes to join the session. So we're going to pause for a few minutes, let people dial into the session, and then we'll get going with the formal presentation. So thank you again for joining, and please hold tight. Good evening, everybody. I continue to see a few folks entering into the presentation. So welcome. You've joined Kinark's Family Education session for this evening. The topic of discussion this evening is the social and emotional development in the early years. What we do is typically allow folks about 4 to 5 minutes to enter the presentation, and then we will start to get into the formal conversation of the evening. So I do welcome you, and hold tight. We'll be starting in a few minutes. Good evening to those who've joined, and thank you for being part of this evening's presentation on the social and emotional development in the early years. We'll give folks one more minute to dial in, and then we will get started with the formal presentation. Hey, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name's Joanne Jones, and I'm the Senior Director for Children and Youth Mental Health Services here at Kinark Child and Family Services. I'm very excited for this evening's presentation, and I welcome you all to one of Kinark's family education sessions. This evening's topic is a very important topic around the social and emotional development in the early years. Our family education series that are developed in partnership with our Family Advisory Committee is intended to build on your capacity as caregivers to identify, understand, and respond to childhood and adolescent mental health distress. During tonight's session, you will learn what is considered normal social and emotional development in children ages 0 to 6. We'll talk about what are some of the factors that contribute to children's behavior, and we'll also cover how parents, families, and caregivers can help. There's a few housekeeping items that I want to share with you before we get started with this evening's session. You will notice that all participants' phone lines are muted and cameras are turned off to ensure clear connection throughout the session. We've set aside time at the end of the presentation to answer any questions that you may have throughout the evening's presentation. You can ask questions by selecting the Q&A icon that you see across the top banner of the presentation. It's around the middle of the banner. And a window will appear and you can enter your questions there. There's also an anonymous feature if you'd like to ask the question anonymously. And feel free to answer questions throughout the presentation. We won't answer them until the end, but if something pops up into your mind and you want to be able to ask the question, simply click the Q&A icon and you can type your question in there. Please note that we can only respond, unfortunately, to general questions relating to today's presentation. Unfortunately, individualized advice cannot be provided, but if you do require ongoing information about your child's development or need for ongoing mental health support, please don't hesitate to reach out to our central intake department. We will try to respond to as many questions as we can this evening, and sometimes we do cluster questions based on themes as they come in throughout the presentation. So if your exact question isn't asked, please know that we do try to cluster the questions based on some commonalities. At the end of the meeting, we will launch a poll to collect your feedback on the session, and you'll also see a poll at the beginning of the session just so we can understand who's joining us this evening. If you have any technical difficulties at all, please use the Q&A feature to report them. We have some amazing IT support that stays with us through the entire presentation, so hopefully we can troubleshoot any issues that we may have. We will launch a poll now to allow yourselves to identify who's in the audience, and this also helps us understand how do we best reach our target audience. So I'll give you a few seconds to respond to that, and then we'll get into the session. Okay, perfect. So now I have the great pleasure to introduce our two presenters for this evening, Jackie Gill and Dawn Sundrup. Jackie Gill's journey in early childhood education began after graduating with honors from Centennial College in 2002. She spent a decade supporting school-age children at Kinark before pursuing her passion for inclusive practices. In 2010, she earned her Inclusive Practice Certificate from Seneca College, enhancing her ability to understand and support children with disabilities and their families. Since 2012, she has been an early childhood education with Kinark's multidisciplinary team focused on delivering Triple P, which stands for Positive Parenting Program. Accredited in 5 levels of Triple P, she equips parents and caregivers with positive strategies to build strong relationships with their children, teach new skills, and managing challenging behaviors. Through her ongoing professional development, Jackie continuously expands her knowledge of evidence-based treatment, allowing her to provide informed and compassionate support to the children and families that we are so privileged to serve. Dawn Sundrup is a dedicated early childhood educator with over 30 years of experience working with Kinark Child and Family Services. She completed her studies at Seneca College, building a solid foundation of knowledge and skills that have guided her throughout her career. Dawn also earned a certificate in inclusion practices, demonstrating her commitment to creating environments where every child can thrive. Dawn's career began as an early childhood educator working in Kinark's child care program, where she developed a deep understanding of child development and family engagement. Her dedication and expertise led her to a supervisory position where she supported her team and contributed to building inclusive and nurturing spaces for children. In 2018, Dawn transitioned to working full-time in children's mental health, where she continues to make a meaningful difference in the lives of children and families. Currently, Dawn serves as an accredited Triple P practitioner and a 0 to 6 children's consultant. She has undergone training in many levels of Triple P and continues to expand her expertise through ongoing training in both Triple P and children's mental health. Her dedication to lifelong learning enables her to provide comprehensive support to families, fostering positive relationships, and nurturing environments for children. It is my absolute honor and privilege to introduce both of our presenters tonight and have both Dawn and Jackie as an integral part of our CYMH program at Kinark. Over to you both, and we really look forward to this evening's presentation.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thanks,
So I
Joanne.
just want to take a moment and welcome everyone. So tonight, Jackie and I are going to present to you some information on social and emotional development in young children. And first, just taking a peek at our agenda, we're going to look at the hard part of parenting, factors that contribute to behavior. We're going to look at what's normal, the social and emotional development in children's age 0 to 6, some biological factors like personality and temperament, diagnosis. We're going to look at or provide you with some resources, and then we're going to set some time at the end for questions like Joanne mentioned. So I always find this slide lots of fun. So Jackie and I work with many parents and families, and what we find is that parents all use similar words to describe being a parent. So on the slide, you'll see in the bubble lots of different words. You'll see words like wonderful, rewarding, heartwarming, and then you'll see some words like exhausting, stressful, challenging, etc. And I'm sure if I could see everyone right now, I can see some parents nodding in agreement that this is exactly how they feel off and on as a parent. So the hard part of being a parent is managing the challenging behavior. We're going to start by looking at some of the factors that contribute to children's behavior. So in this video, I have a picture of our little guy, and he illustrates many contributing factors or stressors to a child's behavior. In the little blue box, you'll see factors that are beyond our control, such as personality, age and stages of development, biological factors like when we come down with a flu or a cold, for any children that might have a diagnosis like autism or ASD. Family dynamics, when we're talking about family dynamics, we're talking about how we can't change who our mom or dad or our aunt and our uncle are. And then when we look around this little guy's body, we see factors that are within our control. Things like transition times, rules and routines, giving instructions. So throughout this presentation, we're going to explore each of these contributing factors and what parents can do to help. So first, we're going to look at the factors that are not within our control. So ages and stages of development. As a parent, you may have a lot of questions around what is normal. Is my child behind? Are other children like this? All children are born with the ability to express their needs, and these expressions change as children learn new skills. So for example, we all know that a baby, when they need something, they cry. That's telling us that they're expressing themselves. That's how they express themselves. As a toddler may cry, might smile, might throw a tantrum, bite or hit, or start to use 1 to 2 words like mine or my turn. For a preschooler, it may look like a toddler may cry, or a preschooler may cry, may yell, may throw an object, might run away, or use some words like, I don't like that, or that's not fair. And then as the child continues to grow and gets into school age, they might start using full sentences like, I'm sad because I can't go to my friend's house. So in the slide, it's a form, it's called the Nipissing District Developmental Screen. And this is used by family doctors and school boards when supporting children and families. And so by the time a child is 6, you should see them doing the following things: showing an interest, helping others. They might want to help you around the house. So things like mopping, sweeping the floor. They may ask if they can help you make their bed, or if you're out working in the yard, they might ask if they can help you with the rake. They're going to start listening to others while they're speaking and watch how that taking turn in conversation happens. That's what we call reciprocity. They're going to start showing an understanding of right and wrong. So they begin to identify social rules, like recognizing when someone in class doesn't put up their hand to speak. They're going to start explaining the rules of a game or activities to others, like how to play tag or how to play hide and seek. They'll also start talking about their own experiences and asking you about yours. So they might be able to say, I went to the zoo and saw an elephant. Have you ever seen an elephant? They'll start paying attention and following simple instructions in group settings. Or as a parent, as a parent, you'll be giving your child many instructions throughout the day, just like something simple like put your dishes in the sink after dinner, put your toys away. They'll be playing cooperatively with like 2 to 3 children and maybe for about 20 minutes at a time. They're going to start having the ability to share toys and take turns, again, for a short period of time. They'll be apologizing for actions. So things they didn't really mean to do, like they might knock over someone's drink or step on someone's foot. Just waiting for. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my next slide up there. And then the next ones are social emotional milestones, and they're taken from my Alberta Health. And these are things, so by the time the child is 6, that we hope they are doing or that they should be doing. But also they will have some fears that are typical of those preschool years. So fears such as monsters, kidnappers, large animals. And some of these fears come from the unknown. So young children have very few life experiences and new things can be scary. And we know that young children have big imaginations. They're going to want their parents to play with them. Parents are their main source of companionship and affection. However, at this age, you might see a gradual shift begin. They'll start to fulfill more of those needs with friends and other people that they admire, such as teachers. They're going to play in ways that include a lot of fantasy and imagination. So you're likely to see them play superheroes, mommy and daddy, teacher, doctor, police, and bad guys. And they often like to be the big kid, so feel like they're taking care of a younger child. If you're bringing a new baby into your home, you could use this stage of development to support that transition. Allow them to be the big brother, the big sister, and help in age-appropriate ways. They'll begin to understand the feelings of others with encouragement from parents and other caregivers, though they still remain mostly focused on themselves. It is helpful to talk about feelings with your child, label them, and validate them. We call that emotional literacy. For example, when it's time to leave a park, if your child's upset, you could say something to them like, you're feeling frustrated because you want to keep playing. I felt that way before too. And we can come back to the park tomorrow, but for now, we need to go for dinner. They'll begin to develop a sense of humor. They may like simple jokes, funny books, and rhymes. So I'm just going to pass it over to Jackie. She's going to look and start talking about mental health in young children. Hi, Jackie.
So in early childhood, we often don't connect the term mental health or mental illness and early childhood in the same sentences. But the one thing we know is that the foundations for mental health and wellness are set by families from the time their babies are born. And there actually is some research now that says it even happens before a baby is born when the mom is carrying the baby. But when we're talking about mental health in early childhood, what we're really talking about is the emerging capacity to regulate and express a range of emotions. So from birth, babies have the full spectrum of emotions, or children have the full spectrum of emotions, even if they don't understand them. Their ability to develop positive relationships with adults and other children, and then ultimately to confidently explore their environment and learn. This is social and emotional development. And we know that this is rapidly developing throughout early childhood. And the one thing that for parents to know is that this emerging capacity is 100% dependent on the child's early relationships with their primary caregivers. And so that could be anybody in that role, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, anybody who's in those early relationships with a child have a significant impact on how a child's mental health or the foundation for their mental health is developed. And this is actually also referred to as developing attachment. And attachment is a word that a lot of parents have heard. Most parents with babies have likely heard of the term attachment, and it's used in a lot of different ways. But when we refer to attachment, we know it's a deep emotional bond. And this bond is between a baby and their caregiver. And the bond is developed because the caregiver provides comfort, security, and that this is the actual foundation for healthy development. Attachment or healthy, secure attachment helps babies meet their needs. It helps them develop coping mechanisms, and it helps them to form a mental representation of caregivers. In other words, it helps them realize whether or not people can be trusted, whether or not people care about me, and whether or not they will meet my needs when I give them cues that I need help. Many parents hear lots of information and lots of advice about what builds a secure attachment. And oftentimes parents will hear things like, it's spending time with your baby, it's giving your baby affection, it's playing with them. When the truth is actually a healthy attachment system for a child is activated when they're in distress. And distress can be for many reasons. So when your child's sick, when they're hurt, when they're hungry, when they're tired, even if they just need comfort, all of those things are things that will trigger distress in your child. And distress looks differently for each child, but a lot of the times you can tell because you see or your child sees or you experience some of those negative emotions. So sadness, crying, yelling, tantruming, all of those things are signs that your child's in distress. And when a child experiences distress, they cue their caregiver to meet their need. This can be fight, so scream, yell. It can be flight, to hide or run away, or it can be freeze, or it can be a combination of these things. And when a child freezes, they don't know what to do. So they usually don't do anything. They might just stand there. And an example of this that I can think of is for a child that has like anxiety, especially social anxiety. When you walk into a new place, a freeze response might be them hiding behind your leg instead of, or not being able to speak, or not being able to play or engage with other people like they normally do. And the one thing we know is that when caregivers respond to these cues and meet their child's need, their child learns that the world is a safe place, and a safe place where my needs are met and my caregivers care for me and love me and will take care of me. And this creates the secure attachment. This is the foundation for positive mental health and well-being. This sets the stage for all their future relationships. The one thing we know is that babies can't soothe themselves. They actually don't have the coping skills at birth to do that. They depend 100% on their caregivers to help. And as children get older, they become more independent in some areas, but their responsive caregiving is still essential when it comes to their distress. So when we're talking about all these things, what do parents need to do? And so when we talk about this, the first thing we always talk about is that parents need to respond to their child's cues of distress. And so as a parent, it's important to observe and listen and respond to your child's distress in a way that helps meet their need. When a child is struggling with their behavior or managing their emotions is just too hard, this is distress. The one thing to remember is that when children behave in ways that are not ideal for us as parents, or even at school for teachers, they're not trying to annoy us. They're trying to get their needs met. And these needs may be for a variety of different things. And so there's two really big areas that we are more aware of in early childhood when it comes to what these needs might be that could help you as parents figure this out too. And so the need might be to gain something that they want. So something they want might be connection, like attention or a hug. It might be a preferred activity, like going to the park. It might be a preferred item, like a toy from the store that they really want. Or it may be sensory input, just to run and climb and play. It might also be to avoid something that they don't want, such as initiating a task, like tidy up, or transitioning to bedtime, or the fear of separation from mom and dad. Or it could be to avoid sensory input. So I've worked with some children that don't like water running down their face. So maybe they don't like bath time. Or it could be that they don't like certain events that are really loud, like going to the fireworks or a birthday party. And so you might see some of these distress behaviors or acting out behaviors during those times to either gain or avoid things that make them uncomfortable. One big thing you can do for parents, and Dawn touched on this a little bit, is name their emotions. When children can name how they feel, they learn more appropriate ways of expressing their feelings. So we look at behavior as nonverbal communication. When your child's behaving in a way that is not ideal, it often is a cue to you that they are not feeling well. And so naming their emotions, even for very young babies, starting it when they're really little, saying something like, I can see that you're feeling sad or you're grumpy because you're feeling hungry, helps them start make the connections of to what their body is telling them and how they're acting, so that they can learn to communicate those things with words. A great thing for parents to do is to validate those emotions as well, normalize them so they know that we all feel these ways sometimes. And so if you're talking about being grumpy because they're hungry, you could say, I feel grumpy too sometimes when I feel that, when I'm hungry, just so that they recognize it's not just them, they're not alone. The one thing that's really important to know is that even if their behavior is not appropriate, you want your child to know that their feelings are always valid. So if your child's throwing a tantrum because they can't have the new toy they wanted in the store, the tantrum may not be appropriate, but what they're feeling in that moment is. So you might say something like, I can see you're frustrated because you really wanted that new toy. It's okay to feel frustrated when you don't get what you want. Do you think a hug might help you feel better? And so helping them connect all of these things together. One of the biggest things parents can do is role model positive ways of coping for themselves. And so when parents are frustrated, they need to be more aware about how they are managing their own behavior and reactions in those moments, and then realize what your child might be learning from you. So if a parent is yelling at their child, or yelling in general, your child might learn that yelling is a way to get my needs met. And so they may be more likely to do that in the future. But if a parent's able to remain calm, maybe take deep breaths, take a break and walk away, or just communicate how they're feeling, their wants, their needs, then a child will learn to do the same thing when they're coping with hard feelings. But as parents, this takes a lot of awareness about how we're feeling and acting in these moments to ensure that we're teaching skills that we want our children to learn. And we know that there are some things that make this really, really difficult. And probably the biggest influence that makes this difficult is the way our brains are wired to operate when they're under distress. And so I have a video that gives an explanation of a very complex brain system, in a way that we can understand and make sense. And so I'm going to show you a video by Dr. Dan Siegel. He's a brain scientist that explains what do our brains do when we're feeling stress and how does that impact the way we behave.
One of the most rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child, and that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life.
Okay. So in this video, this is the adult explanation of what's happening in the brain. But if for anybody on the call, if you were interested in showing your child, if you have a child that's 5 and 6 and you are interested in showing them a video to help them understand what's happening when they're getting upset, there is a psychotherapist online named Jeanette Yoffe. And if you search her name on YouTube, Jeanette Yoffe and the hand model of the brain, it plays a puppet version of this that explains this model to young children so that they understand what's happening in their brain as they're becoming upset. But the reason I show this is because this is not just your brain as a parent, but it's everyone's brain. So this includes your child. This is exactly the same way that their brain operates. And the only difference between you and your child is that your brain, if you're above mid-20s, is fully developed now. So the cortex part of the brain that Dr. Dan Siegel spoke about, the one that's responsible for flexible thinking and perceiving the outside world and language and communication, that part of your brain is fully developed. While for your children that are under 6, it is very underdeveloped. So like I said, that mental health is rapidly developing throughout the early years. And so your child, if they're 6 years old, has another 20 or so years to go before that part of their brain is fully developed. And so it makes sense when you think about it that they operate from a very emotional space. And so they're very sensitive and reactive. And that's because the emotional center of their brain that Dr. Dan Siegel spoke about in here is fully developed at the time they're born. And the reason it's fully developed is so they can give you those cues of distress for babies that they need to be fed and held and changed. It's actually an instinct to survive. And so that part of the brain is fully developed and operational from the moment they're born. And so that's often why children can respond quite emotionally. And so, sorry, I just flipped this button.
One of the most
Sorry. And so when we're thinking about this, it's essential for us as parents during stressful moments to lend our calm. And so one thing that I'm also really interested in this topic is something we call co-regulation. So as parents, you often will hear terms like self-regulation, but for young children, I say that self-regulation is really not a thing. What children do is co-regulate. They co-regulate with the caregivers in their environment by borrowing some of the caregiver's calm in these moments. So as parents, it's important that we stay calm so that we can offer the hug that they need or the validation that they need or naming the emotion that they're experiencing so that they start to make those connections for themselves. And then as they get older, they become more and more independent in this area so that they can begin to self-regulate. I'll touch on this here while I'm here. If you were interested in learning more about Dan Siegel and some of his research or some of the things that he talks about, he actually has 2 really great books. One is called The Whole Brain Child, and so he goes in depth into the hand model of the brain and how it impacts children. And then he also has No Drama Discipline, which is the parenting response book that follows the whole brain child. Is what are things that you can do as a parent to raise a whole brain child that their whole brain functions well. And so those are just two resources that I really like to recommend for parents, because that's kind of where this information came from in the presentation. So thinking about that, one thing that we often get questions about is, why does my child always respond angrily or aggressively to their emotions? And when we think of that, we know that the things that our children do, such as hitting, kicking, screaming, we often perceive as anger too. And so however, we know is that one thing that we know is that anger is often a secondary emotion. So it's just the tip of the iceberg, which is why we show it in the anger iceberg. So and it's just what we see above water in our child's behavior. But underneath all of that are often other emotions that your child is experiencing. And these things can be things like jealousy, loneliness, fear, hurt. And those are all things that we don't see as parents. And so we need to be observant as parents and understand why our child may be exhibiting anger. So what's leading to this behavior? And so an example we often hear from parents that we're working with is that they're at a grocery store and their child's tantruming in the middle of the aisle, and maybe they don't know why, and they just all of a sudden drop to the floor screaming. And so a big thing that we look at is, what are some of the underlying reasons that a child might act that way? And so we know that there's things like boredom or hunger or being tired, and how all of these things will contribute to a child tantruming. And so it's important for us as parents to kind of look at the bigger picture, what's happening at that time, all around that time, to figure out what might be influencing or the underlying emotion that the child is experiencing, even if anger is what we see. And there are many factors that contribute to how we respond to our emotions. And so when we look at this, the first thing we're going to look at is biology. So at the very beginning, we talked about discussing biology and how that might impact a child. And so we know that each child is unique, and their biology is something we cannot change. So biology, just like it includes things like hair color, eye color, height, it also includes things like neurodiversity and disability. And so in there you see things like ADHD, ASD, FASD. And these, if your child experiences neurodiversity or a disability, these have known challenges associated with them. So for an example, if you have a child that has ADHD, we know that they have difficulties with attention and focus and executive functioning. And sometimes the challenge as a parent is those difficulties are also experienced in the early years typically. So young children often will struggle with attention and focus and executive functioning, and it has nothing to do with ADHD. And so later on, we're going to talk about, if you have concerns about this, what should you do? Because it may not mean that they have ADHD either, but it's just something that we know is associated. If your child has autism spectrum disorder or ASD, one of the known difficulties is social communication. Or if your child has FASD, we know that there's often more global developmental difficulties that they can experience, like language delays or cognition difficulties, or even difficulties with their motor development, walking, sitting up, rolling over. But the one thing, again, to kind of continue on with this, is that children don't behave in ways to be problematic to us on purpose. It's just them coping in their environment with the skills they have in that moment. So as parents, we just need to look at behavior as nonverbal communication. What is it telling us they need help with? On top of that, there's also their personality. And personality does partially come from biology. So they're born sensitively wired to certain things. And it also comes from experience. So it kind of develops from those two things. Each child has their own unique personality. Each person has their own unique personality. And there really is no good or bad personality trait. one thing we start looking at in the early years is what we call goodness of fit. And goodness of fit can be with environments or with people. And what goodness of fit emphasizes is that there's no one size fits all approach to raising or interacting with children. It recognizes that children and adults have different temperaments, and the environment, including parenting styles and classroom settings, should be and need to be adjusted to accommodate these differences. A child who's highly active might thrive in a classroom with opportunities for movement. So children that we often work with that have ADHD really struggle if they're in environments where they have lots of seated time, circle time, instructional time, but they thrive in environments where there's lots of physical activity or movement instead. While other children who are more sensitive might need quieter or less stimulating environments. So on the opposite side to that, there are some children that really thrive in classrooms where there's lots of seated time or desk work or circle time. And so again, this goes back to there's not one right approach to this. It's kind of meeting the child where they're at and knowing them well enough. This also goes to interaction between people. So a parent who's more active might need to adjust their expectations and actions to better suit a child who's maybe more slow or quiet and requires more downtime. If you're interested in learning more about temperament, I'm going to touch on some things here in the next slide. But if you're ever interested in goodness of fit or more about temperament, there's lots of information that you can look up online to get more information about it or to look into this if you're interested for your own child. But we mentioned temperament, and these are 9 temperament areas that we often look at when we're thinking about goodness of fit. And so a person can be low, moderate, or high in each of these 9 areas. And the one benefit is that when parents are more aware about their child's temperament, they can start to predict the challenges that might occur and plan ahead to support and accommodate their child's needs. But this is not information we're given when our child's born, is like temperament and goodness of fit and what does all of this mean. And so I'm hoping that by doing this, I can give you a little bit of insight into your own child. And so I want to break each of these down a little bit. And as we go through these, I want you to think about your child and where you think they might fit on this scale. Do you feel like maybe they're low here, they're moderate here, or they're high here? And how does that impact the way they interact at home, at school, with friends, with you? And so the first temperament scale we look at is activity, or a child's activity level. And this means your child's need for movement. And so thinking about this, does your child lean towards more active or more quieter pursuits? Do they prefer to be outdoors on the go riding their bike? Or would they prefer to sit at home and color or read a book? Or is it a bit of both, somewhere in the middle? And not only that, but how easily do they switch between activity levels? So how easily do they manage coming in? So you've just been to the park, they're coming in and it's dinner time, and now they need to sit at a table. Do they find that quite easy to transition, or do you have difficulties at the dinner table because your child struggles to sit still? Because coming from a high activity experience to a low activity is too difficult. Distractibility is when you're exposed to external stimuli. So things like sounds or sights. So for an example, if I'm sitting and I'm working at my desk, or your child's sitting and working on something and they hear a horn outside, do they immediately need to go check and see what that is, or are they immediately stop what they're doing, or can they keep working? But this can also be internal discomfort. So things like hunger or fatigue, and how much does that distract them or interrupt their ability to continue ongoing behavior or tasks that they're working on. We also look at regularity, which refers to the predictability of someone's basic biological functions. And so this includes eating, sleeping, and elimination. So does your child require to have meal times at the same time every day? Or it really throws off their schedule? Do they require to be in bed at the exact same time every night, or they struggle to sleep? Or it ruins the whole next day because they're too tired. And I always connect with this one because my own children, but I have two very highly regular children. And for me, I'm lower on this scale. And so my children needed to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the exact same time of day. And for me, I more go based on how I'm feeling. And so at noon, they would be standing at in the living room going, okay, Mom, what's for lunch? And I'd be like, I have no idea because I didn't even think about it. I wasn't hungry. And so that created some challenges for us. And now knowing that they need lunch at noon is starting to plan ahead is like, I might not need it, but they do. Um, Intensity of reactions is another big one that we often see in the early years. And this is to various experiences and other people or other people's emotions. And so some children are what we call high intensity reactors. So this means they exhibit strong, passionate, noticeable emotional responses to different situations, different people, different events, or people's emotions. So if they notice that someone else is upset, they have an intense response to somebody else being upset. While others are really low intensity reactors, where they display subdued or muted or even no reaction to other people's upset. And this can have an impact because it can make them appear like they don't care. Even though this is just a temperament response. It's not good or bad, it just is who they are or how they respond to different things. Adaptability fits in here. So how easily and quickly a child adjusts to new situations or changes in the routine or unexpected events. And so some children are naturally more adaptable and readily accept new experiences. So you wake up in the morning and there's been a change and mom normally takes them to school or childcare and now dad has to do it instead because of a switch in mom's work schedule. For a child that's adaptable or easily adaptable, that would not be a problem at all. They would like continue on with their normal morning routine, maybe even be excited that dad's taking them today instead of mom. But for a child that's less adaptable, that might throw off the entire morning where they really significantly struggle to get dressed, eat breakfast, and get to school on time because they feel like it's really disruptive and they didn't expect it. Approach withdrawal fits in here. This is your initial reactions to new people, new places, new things. Some individuals readily approach new experiences and thrive in that environment. So these are like what we call social butterflies. They're the child that can like hop into any room and talk to anyone and be okay with that. While others will withdraw or hesitate. And these are the ones that we know as a wallflower. They kind of sit in the background and wait to feel comfortable. Some children, this takes a very long time. So we call this a slow to warm temperament. So for some children, they'll sit on the wall and after 5 or 10 minutes, they'll start to socialize. I would say that's probably more often what we see in the early years, just because they're not unsure. They'll sit in the background, wait a little bit, and then once they feel comfortable, it's okay. And they socialize like everyone else. But there are some children that this takes longer and they need more time and more practice and more repetition. And so knowing that that's okay too, and that's things that you can plan for as parents. Sensitivity to senses. So senses include what you see, what you hear, what you taste, touch, smell. Some children are highly sensitive to their senses and very attuned to their senses and their surroundings. And even subtle changes in their environment or the emotions of others can really disrupt their sensory system. So so I can remember being in a class for myself, even, and you're sitting in a class or you're sitting in a quiet space and you can hear the fan whirring in the ceiling. And for most or many people, somebody who is not highly sensitive, they wouldn't even notice that. But for a child that's highly sensitive, that's all they can hear and they can't concentrate on anything else. And so it might make it very difficult for them to follow instructions or do what's being asked of them. But this doesn't only include sound. This might also be smell. So if you've cooked something really strong that smells really strong, that might be enough that they can't focus on anything else but what they can smell. All of you have probably had picky children that are picky eaters. Many parents talk about this. So where they won't eat because of the taste, the texture of what they're eating. And so They're really not trying to make it difficult for us. It's just for them, whatever is happening sensorially is too intense. Persistence is another big one that parents talk about. And we all have different levels of persistence, which is your ability and desire to persist through completing a difficult task. So in children in particular, this is persistence can be observed in their willingness to work at difficult tasks, things like puzzles, homework, mastering new skills like riding a bike, or to stick with it until you've completed it. So for a child that's really low in persistence, as soon as they come up against a challenge, they will give up and aren't able to go back to it. For a child that's really high in persistence, they will persist through this, and they would do it over and over and over again, and almost sometimes can struggle to even stop doing it or give it up until they've mastered it. And then there are some children that are in between. And so again, all of these things can cause challenges. So a child that gives up right away doesn't learn that there's an opportunity that they can actually learn this skill. A child that persists to frustration, too much frustration is a bad thing as well. So we want our children to learn, like, you can ask for help or take a break, and this can help you reset and try again. Mood is a big one. And so a person's temperament can strongly influence their usual mood. And so whether they tend to be more positive or negative or somewhere in between, it's really important to kind of know, how does your child present? So temperament can affect behavior and how someone moves through the world, or how they respond to challenges, or even how they respond in their relationships. And when I'm thinking about mood, if you kind of want to, there's one example in particular I always think about when you're thinking about interaction. And so many of us have seen Disney, and I always think about Winnie the Pooh in this example. And so there are some people that are like Eeyore, or some children are like Eeyore, that kind of down mood, low, really hard to motivate. And there are some people that are like Tigger, really excitable and easy to engage and easy to make friends and maintain relationships. And so knowing kind of, or your child can be somewhere in between, where they have low mood days, but they also have a balance of energetic high mood days. And so it's important to know. And when I'm talking about mood, I'm talking about like consistent amounts of time. It's not like here and there they experience low mood or high like activity or excitability. It's they're spending long periods of time in being low or being high. Later in the discussion, we're going to share some accommodations or supports you may put in place to help your child manage the distress of environments or people that don't fit well with their temperament. But for now, we're going to put this on the back burner, and Dawn's going to take over from here. We're going to talk about the final factor, the one that's out of your control, in that little blue box on the first slide. The last thing that contributes to their social and emotional development.
Thanks, Jackie. So the last one we're looking at is family dynamics. We know that each family is unique and has their own values and beliefs. We know that what happens in a family's home can have a large impact on the way a child interacts with others. In family where there's lots of arguing or fighting, children can learn that that's the way to get their needs met. When we think about parenting styles, so often the way you are parented has an impact on the way you parent. We know that inconsistency, so children like to play parents off each other or refer to it as a good cop, bad cop. Some parents are easygoing and some are laid back, or some are more assertive and some are more assertive and firmer. There's parents' beliefs that impact that play a role in the family dynamic. So maybe we believe that boys will be boys, or it's just a phase, they'll outgrow it. And then we look at parents' emotions. So if a parent's anxious or stressed or depressed, it's harder to be available to your child. What works for one child may not work for another. Having realistic expectations, especially in families where we have infants up to teens. So looking at, is it realistic to have the same bedtime when we have a 5-year-old and we have a 12-year-old? And then we also want to look at the family structure. So extended families, multiple generations living in one home, for families where there's separation or divorce and parents are co-parenting, is the relationship amicable or is there lots of conflict? And one thing to be thinking about in these homes where there's multiple generations living, or there's co-parenting, children are going back and forth to moms or dads, are the expectations consistent and is there good communication? Because if not, we know that there's going to be some misbehavior happening. So now we're going back to our slide, looking at all the factors that impact a child's social and emotional growth and learning. And this time it's looking at the things that we can control. So all the things on the outside of our little guy's body. I'm just going to touch on a few, I'm going to touch on all of them more in depth. I'm just going to review them first. So you see at the top there, it says rules and routines. So as we know, children need structure and routine. And as Jackie mentioned, some children need more than others. We can put things into place at home to help, such as like visual schedules to help our children know what is expected of him or her, or to predict what's happening next. And that can decrease anxiety and other problematic behaviors. There's transitions. So many children have difficulty with transitioning from one activity to the next or from one setting to the next. So putting some strategies into place can help alleviate anxieties at those times. Changes in routines, similar to a transition. Change in routine can cause severe anxiety and increased behaviors in children. So having some strategies in place can prevent this. And then physical and emotional state of a child. So if a child's not feeling well emotionally or physical, they may lash out or be uncooperative. And on those days, you're just going to have to change the expectations or the event or whatever it is that's occurring. If your child has difficulty communicating, so for those children who have limited language, their levels of frustration can be so high that acting out becomes their form of communication. Consequences, how a parent or caregiver respond to behavior has an impact on the likelihood of behavior occurring in the future. An under or overstimulating environment. So some children have sensory issues. Jackie talked a little bit about that too. So they could be easily distracted by that external stimuli, such as a fire truck or a siren or a vacuum. The home environment. So the home environment can influence how a child functions. And then instructions. We are going to go into depth to all of these just in a second. So instructions, parents give many instructions daily, and there's many things that can make an instruction less or more effective. There's social situations. Children often lack appropriate social skills, but as they're learning, they need lots of practice and guidance to interact with peers and to be more successful in group situations. And then there's task demands. So we know that if they're not geared at the child's level, that this can be extremely overwhelming for them. So now we're going to look at what parents and caregivers can do to help. So when we're looking at rules and routines, when it comes to rules, we want to create a few family rules. So you want to have a few house rules, discuss them as a family, and then post them, whether it's a fridge, a countertop, somewhere nearby where everyone can see them daily. We would encourage you to just create a few rules, ensure that they're fair, and that they're worded positively. So it tells the child what to do instead of what not to do. So rather than the rule saying no hitting, it would be best to say we keep our hands and feet to ourselves. Have some consistent routine times. So for waking up, for dinner, for homework, and for bedtime. The more predictable a routine is, we know that the more cooperative a child will be because they know what to expect. Again, some children are more flexible than others. And again, it's important to kind of understand how your child responds to changes in routine. And that way you know how much you need to prepare in advance. And often that's just like, hey, look, tomorrow morning, mommy's going to be going to work early, so it means that daddy's going to be there to help you get dressed and pack your lunch. Or it could be like, remember, tomorrow's not a school day, so you won't be getting up and going on the bus, but you'll be going to childcare for the day, or you'll be going to grandma's for the day. It's amazing how much just a little bit of prep can do to make things go more smoothly. So that leads us right into transitions again, preparing in advance, getting lunch packed the night before. So as a parent, I can remember the days of packing lunches and then the days when I get called in earlier and it's like, oh, if I just packed their lunch the night before and laid out their clothes. So maybe as a parent, you want to make sure that you're giving yourself extra time, even if that means waking up 30 minutes early, just to reduce that rushing around and lessen some of the chaos in the morning. Next one is physical and emotional states. We want to watch for cues of distress in our children. We want to acknowledge their feelings, whether they're tired, um, if they're just not feeling well, and having realistic expectations. So if a child's sick, hungry, or tired, they're less likely to manage strong emotions in those more desirable ways. For some children, they may have difficulties communicating. And what we recommend here is that if you notice your child has difficulties communicating, that you first speak with your family doctor, and then from there seek further referrals and supports. The next one is consequences. So when we're giving our children consequences, we want to make sure that they're logical or fit the behavior. The example that we have in our slide, if a child's bouncing a ball in the house, the consequence is that they would lose the ball. And consequences should be like brief, 3 to 5 minutes. And we want a consequence to provide an opportunity for the child to try again. So the learning happens when they're actually given that ball back, they use it correctly. And as a parent, we're like, good job bouncing the ball outside, whatever it is the expectation is. And encouraging them to do the right thing. As soon as we see them doing it, we praise them. I'm sure you've heard, or maybe you've done this, a parent who says, that's it, I'm taking all your toys and I'm putting them in the garbage, going in a garbage bag. And so the toys are all gone for a day. And when we think about it, there's no opportunity for them to learn how to play with that toy correctly. So it's really not a realistic consequence. It's not a logical consequence. The next one is task demands. So focusing on one thing at a time. The one thing that stands out here is getting dressed. So we want to break larger tasks into smaller parts. So especially in the wintertime when children are getting dressed, they have so many pieces of clothing to get on. Thinking of a way that you can break that down, whether it's a visual schedule, having a picture, being there, like first you get on your snow pants. If you get on one boot, I'll help you with the other. Maybe you just zip their coat up a little bit or get it attached and let them zip it up. So again, breaking those tasks down so that they can be more successful. And then social instructions. So thinking about extracurricular activities, we want children to be successful in these. So find something that they like and that they're good at, that you think they'll have fun doing, to encourage that social piece with other children. Even arranging a play date. And when you're arranging a play date and it's in your own home, then you get to see how your child's interacting with others and you're there to offer support as needed. So we know as a parent that we give hundreds of instructions every day. And we're going to look at some ways that we know make instructions more or less effective. So the first one is giving clear, calm instructions. So we want to make sure that we're getting close within an arm's reach when we're giving instructions. We're going to make sure we're telling our child exactly what to do rather than not what to do. So as parents, it can get really easy for us if we're frustrated to say, stop doing that. What did I tell you? But what we want to do is tell them what to do instead. So instead of, why did you put your backpack on the floor? It's, you need to pick your backpack up and put it on the hook. We want to make sure that when we're giving an instruction, be aware of timing. So if a child's in the middle of a favorite TV show or a video game or reading a book, be mindful of that. It might not be the best time to ask them to go clean their room. Again, we want to give them warnings, let them know, like, okay, ask them, how long is left of the movie? If they say 5 minutes, great. When the movie's over, then I need you to go and tidy up your room or tidy up your toys. We want to praise our child when they do as they are asked, and we want to be specific and sincere. So, Joey, I really like the way you tidied up your toys and put them in the bin today. Great job. Maybe a little thumbs up. And then some of the more less effective ways of giving instruction would be long distance. So it's not helpful if we're upstairs and we're shouting down to our children. We're not making eye contact. We don't even know if they can see us or hear us. Instructions that are vague. So if you say something like, don't be silly, or you know better, that doesn't tell the child what you want them to do. So it's not helpful. The next one is something that I got caught up in often as a parent till I was taught that it's just not the right way. But posing, when you give an instruction as a question, so can you tidy up your room? Can you get ready for your bath? That gives the child an opportunity to say no, shake their head. So we want to make sure that we're not posing our instructions as a question, but rather saying it's time for bed or it's time to get ready for bed. You need to get ready for your bath. Giving too few instructions. So the example is go get ready for bed. Well, that doesn't tell them like what you want. That's too few. Maybe it's brush your teeth, get your pajamas on. We need to be more specific and clear. We can also give too many. We can also say, okay, run upstairs, brush your teeth, get your pajamas on, go find your slippers, get your book, turn your lights off, and they only remember the first two. So again, making sure it's not too few and not too many, depending on the age of your child. Now we look at environments, they could be over or under stimulating. So ensuring that in your home, inside and out, that you are providing engaging activities. We know that bored children are most likely to misbehave. So ensuring that they have something to do and making sure that that activity meets your child's needs. So being aware of their activity preference, any sensitivities they have. So Jackie mentioned before, there's someone that like to have high energy. So is it gross motor? Or are they happy, doing crafts and puzzles and reading? And then we look at the home environment, spending quality time with their child. So we know that short periods of time can be more effective throughout the day with our child than setting aside like an hour. Often, if we say, okay, I'm going to spend the next hour with my child, there's going to be interruptions. The phone's going to ring. You have to go start dinner. So it's best if when your child comes to you, you can just stop what you're doing and give them 30 seconds or 3 to 5 minutes of your own. Just stop what you're doing and give them that attention. That's going to be more beneficial than that long hour. So short periods of time throughout the day when your child approaches you. Another thing you can do is talk to your child. So again, when they come to you, show an interest in whatever they're talking about, whether that's video games, clothing, makeup, sports. And having those easy conversations now is teaching the child that you're there and they can talk to you about anything. And this is going to help as they go into the teenage years when topics get a little bit harder. So again, keeping that conversation open so that they can bring things to you at a younger age. In the home environment, we have affection. So some children enjoy snuggles, hugs, and kisses, while others prefer a pat on the back or props or knuckles or high fives. So just recognizing how it is that your child likes to receive affection. And again, role model it. And, whenever you can, spend that time showing affection and giving high fives. So now that we've looked at some of the things you can do as a parent, our hope is that you'll take away some of these ideas to help in your home. And if you still have concerns or feel that more support is needed, we're going to look at some resources that are available.
Okay, so just to wrap up before we get to questions, oftentimes we'll get a lot of questions from parents about, where can I go for diagnosis if I'm concerned that my child may have ADHD or autism, or how do I refer for services, or are there resources where I can look into for more information? And so Number one, the best place to always start is with your family doctor. If you have concerns about your child's development in any way, you can start off by talking to the family doctor, share your concerns, and see what they have to say. You can ask your family doctor for a referral to a developmental pediatrician if you want to talk to somebody who's more specialized in any particular area. Canuck Child and Family Services is a great resource, and we're self-referral. So you as a parent can, or your, if children are older, they can call themselves to access services. If you have developmental, so if you have concerns around your child's mental health, social and emotional development, Canuck is a great resource. If you have concerns around developmental concerns, so things like speech, cognition, physical development, or you have concerns that your child might have autism, the best approach or the best referral source is early intervention services of York for us in York region, or finding your local early intervention service program and making a referral there. And many of those are self-referral as well. And if not, often the best route to get in is through your family doctor. So if you talk to your family doctor, they might know how to get referred there. But finally, if all the things that Dawn and I have talked about, like what can we do as parents, and if you want to dig deeper into all of that, Triple P Parenting is the parenting program that Canuck has adopted. It's research and evidence-based. It's offered across York region, and there's actually a website that parents can go to. So if you scan the QR code on the slide here, this will take you to the calendar of events. So there will be some topic specific programs running, some groups that are being offered, and parents can refer themselves to these as well. Many, if not all of these are free, so parents can register for them free, and many of them are offered virtually. So you can take them from the comfort of your own home. And so this website also has blog posts and newsletters and things that you can look for. You can actually search topics that you want to read more about, and you can get some more information on the website as well. So with that being said, that brings us kind of to the end of the overview tonight, and we'll open it up for questions.
Wow, Jackie and Dawn, that was incredible. Like so many great speaking points about understanding behaviors and what you see within your child, and great parenting pointers, and that hand model of the brain. I just love that. So thank you so much. And I see some claps happening there. So I'm sure those in the audience found it equally as engaging and informative. For those that have asked, a copy of this presentation will be available on our website within the coming week. I think it takes about a week for us to post it, and you will find it under resources under the home page. And I do have a couple of questions, so I will share those with you both. So what if your child is exhibiting behaviors at home, but the school or the child care setting is not reporting any of those behaviors, or vice versa? So they're presenting with behaviors at school, but at home you're not seeing any of those things. So how would a parent approach that?
Dawn, do you want to take that, or do you want me to take that?
Go ahead. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my screen. Go ahead.
That's okay. So that actually is very, very common. So especially for younger children, home is their safe place. It's where they feel the most confident, the most secure. And so often if they're going to test limits or boundaries or safety, they're going to do that at home, because their parents are predictable, and they know that their parents love them and will be there if they need them. And so oftentimes parents will say that my child doesn't do this anywhere else. And I would say that's a good thing, because if they're not doing these things that are not desirable for you at home anywhere else, that means you've done your job. That means you've taught them what is appropriate or socially appropriate in other environments, and they're using those skills. And so absolutely, if they're going to experiment with something, do it with me as a parent, so that I can teach you our values and set the limits and expectations in place so that you can use them eventually at home and school. And if it's vice versa, so if it's the other way around, where maybe at home they're doing better and at school they're struggling, I would start looking at school where the behavior might be because they're not feeling secure or sure about what's happening. And so likely what I would do is check in with the school and just get a better understanding of when are the difficulties happening, and see if there's things that you do as a parent that you might recommend to the school that could be helpful. Because oftentimes it might be just a difference in the way the school does things that your style works better for your child. And so the best thing you can do if it's happening at school and not home is to be a great team partner and communicate with the school staff and administration around planning for what works best for your child.
Amazing. Thank you. That's really helpful. And just a reminder to folks, we still do have a few more minutes for questions and answers. So if you want to type in a question in the Q&A box, we're happy to answer them for you. Another question just came through. So I've talked to my doctor about some concerns that I have about my child and some of the behaviors that they're presenting with. However, the doctor says to wait or says, don't worry, they'll outgrow it. Any suggestions on how I manage something that I know might not quite be what my child usually engages in, but my doctor is saying, give it some time?
I can try. I can do my best to answer that question. I think that Jackie pointed out one of the great resources is early intervention services. You could maybe ask your doctor if you could get a referral to there. Again, I always, when my children were younger, I always used like my group of friends or my family just to see if there's any differences. Um, and also comparing your children. If you have an older child who didn't exhibit those types of behaviors or concerns that you might have, it sounds like you've kind of picked up on that. You've recognized that, hey, something just isn't right here. And it is hard for doctors to say, yeah, it's this when they're at a young age and they're still developing. Jackie pointed out a couple of things when we were talking about like ADHD. Those kind of things like their executive functioning, they're developing. So we might see them not paying attention when they're like 3 years old, but we know that that's quite typical. So it doesn't mean that they have ADHD. That's where they're at in that stage of development.
Yeah.
And
So I'm
just
not sure if that helped. Go
just
ahead,
to hop
Jackie.
on to that, the other thing I always think is, as a parent, you are your child's best advocate. And I also think there is no harm in getting on a wait list for services or being referred to a specialist, even if they're going to tell you, nope, they're fine, because at least you as a parent have the reassurance that they're okay. Because it's much more harmful if you wait that time and it does end up being difficult or something that they need support with, because we know early intervention is best. And so I always say, as you as a parent, if your doctor's like, let's wait and see, it's okay for you as a parent to say, you know what, I'd rather not. I really would feel much more comfortable if we do the referral now, even if they tell me it's okay.
Yeah.
And so I think always err on the side of caution. Even for us as professionals, we'd say err on the side of caution, because if we say, no, you don't need these services, that's a much better outcome than if you did need them and you ended up waiting when there was already bigger challenges happening.
Right. Yeah. No, appreciate that. And I love the words, you are your child's best advocate so thank you for reminding us of that. And one more question. Is there an age limit to the diagnosis of ADD or ADHD? Like, are you seeing that come at a certain age range, or are there variances in that diagnosis?
Definitely variances.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I think it depends on the comfort level of the doctor that you're seeing. Some doctors are very, very comfortable making that diagnosis very early. So I've seen children as young as 4 or 5.
Okay.
And some doctors are like, let's wait and let's let them get into school and start to see, does it impact their academics or social skills? So I've seen a bit of both. There is no 100% right answer. It could be either. They could be very young and they could wait.
Early. Yeah. Okay. That's great. Thank you. Well, it looks like that's come to the end of our question and answer segment. So I do thank you both sincerely for all of this wonderful information. And thank you to our audience for joining us this evening and taking time out of your evening to join us for this session. And we do hope that you have found this information extremely helpful. We're going to give you one last poll, and these questions help us do some future planning. So I do hope that you take some time to answer the final 3 questions. And just as a reminder, a copy of this will be available within the next week on our website under resources. And I do appreciate everybody's time and attention this evening for this really well-presented family education series. And thank you again, Don and Jackie, for bringing your knowledge, passion, and experience to this event. So much appreciated. Have a good evening, everybody.